All right, guys. First, let's take a look at the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100 futures charts. So my red line strategy, which is based on the 4-period moving average, that's the red line that you see. We typically touch that red line almost every single week. The majority of the time, you'll notice. So we're a bit far from the red line this week on the weekly time frame. So that might suggest that we potentially will get a pullback on the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 this week. Although price action remains bullish, so it's hard to just want to go into a short right here because right now I don't see any big catalysts for the short at this moment. So I'm going to keep the red line potential as a potential target, and I'm going to keep it in mind this week, but I don't want to just jump into a short either. Now, we do have multiple resistance levels around here, both on the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq. So we're going to keep that in mind. And as of now, the bears have showed up ever so slightly at that resistance point, and they're trying to stop the bulls from breaking that resistance. You can see it right here on the Nasdaq 100 futures, and I'm sure it's the same on QQQ. Looks like they passed it slightly on QQQ, but they didn't fill this gap area on QQQ. So this area should be a pretty heavy resistance here. And the low to fill the gap, the bulls would need to take QQQ to just above 480. I'm going to look at that as a potential resistance area. The closer it gets to that level, would be safer to short it with a tight stop loss if it fills the gap. If it's unable to fill the gap, that would show some weakness in my view and would suggest that we may potentially get our pullback that the bears are really waiting for here because the bears got clobbered in the last few weeks on this huge bounce. Luckily, I wasn't shorting into this bounce. Hopefully you weren't. And really, it's a day-by-day play. You don't want to have a bias because a lot of people got biased and bearish, in which I lean to the bearish side as well. But you don't want to jump in front of a train. And, you know, after a huge drop on the NASDAQ, we're bound to get a bounce. And once the bounce got underway, you had that high volume spike at the low. Once the bounce got underway, there was no stopping the bulls here. So we're going to watch this area as a potential resistance area and looking for a potential pullback this week towards the weekly red line, although not going to have a bias, and we're going to play it day by day to make sure we don't jump in front of what might potentially be a continued move, potentially back towards those all-time highs. We're not that far off the all-time high on SPY. It's only $10, just over $10 away. So it's very possible the bulls take this right back to those all-time highs this week, especially if the banks continue to remain bullish. And I was looking at some of the banks, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. A lot of these charts are looking very bullish. And the S&P 500, a large chunk of it is the financials. So if the financials are bullish, even if tech might be bearish, if financials are bullish, it's unlikely that SPY is going to come down very much, even if tech is weak. So seeing a lot of strength in financials, a lot of strength in tech in the last week, although tech is kind of recovering from a big sell-off, whereas there wasn't as big of a sell-off on the bank stocks. And the tech charts took a pretty big hit. You can see on some stocks, they made a big recovery for sure. But inevitably, I do believe we are looking for a lower high on some of the tech names. Meta, as of now, is rejecting that all-time high over here. NVIDIA, really big rebound, ultimately still looking for a potential lower high on the weekly because we already got a huge bounce and we might get a little bit more, but going to likely see some resistance as it approaches 128. I know 128 to 132 might be a big resistance area on NVIDIA, so I'm going to watch out for that. But let's take it day by day. I'll see you guys on the live tomorrow, and I'll let you know any trades that I take. But that's what I'm looking at as of now.